Let's call the meeting to order. So there were a few topics that we wanted to discuss we had discussed at the last meeting, but we weren't able to have a quorum. Since then, some additional conversations have taken place, and that's in regards to the landscaping. Jane actually had a long and what seems like a very productive meeting with the landscape architect. Jane, do you want to talk a little bit about that and why at the end of the day we're going to hold off?
Yeah, sure. And he apologized. He had a coaching commitment today with his kiddos, but he spent a really nice amount of time with me walking around the perimeter of Phelps. And it seems as though the plants, the two types of plants in particular, one, the plants that are in the front of the building are the best example. We're not supposed to grow beyond 36 inches. Clearly, they grew to almost 6 feet. So the non-dwarf type, it seemed to have been planted rather than the dwarf type, which was what our plans called for. In addition, the second piece was the ornamental grasses that are also all around the perimeter and within the pods are collapsing and folding out. He has not seen that happen before, so he's not sure if those are incorrect plants as well, or if they were planted incorrectly, because they're folding out and they're blocking walkways, etc. So he couldn't come tonight. He didn't think he was going to have enough time to talk to Jay. Hi, Jay, or Lorraine before the 5 o'clock meeting to come to sort of some sort of idea on what to go next. So I think before we take any action to rip out or, propose a change order or anything like that, we should give the small little working group a little bit more time to see what we could maybe just work out on our own.
So with that, thanks, Jane. So with that, we're going to hold off until we can get a little more information. We'll have a couple of, we're going to have a meeting later, hopefully this week, with the landscape architect, Alan, Jane, Sean, myself, and see if we can come to an agreement before we may have to take a vote on something. Because if it was wrong plants, there may be some may be able to rectify it without taking a vote. All right. One of the other things that was on the agenda was the electronic scoreboard. And with that, the scoreboard, or the electronic board, not the scoreboard, but the board. I think everyone's aware it's a larger electronic board than what was spec'd out. We've two choices. One is we could purchase it at a discount, or we could just as part of the project, because it was spec'd incorrectly, have it replaced with the right board. So we had a couple of conversations internally in town, and there's, whether it's the town, whether it's the school, there's not a need for it. So at least at this time. So with that, there really is not a need for a vote, because the outcome would be, because it was spec'd incorrectly, that electronic sign that is currently installed would be removed, and the electronic sign that was originally spec'd out would be the one that's put in to be replaced. All right. So yeah, those are two things that we were talking about that would need a vote. And right now, those two things don't at this point. Did someone have a question or?
Yeah, Rich, it was spec'd correctly. It was just ordered incorrectly.
Well, thanks, Jay. Yeah, it was spec'd correctly. It was just ordered incorrectly. Thank you. Thanks. The third one, and this one is still on the table and up for discussion. So this is in regards to the softball field. So the softball field on the original scope was to replace the left and right field fences, the backstop, and the dugouts. But what ended up happening is, because of the limited space that we had in the footprint, that really started to become a staging area, which did some damage to the field that was not originally anticipated. So with that, there's been some additions to some fencing, but also that field has to be graded and reseeded. So during the conversations, there were a couple of options, right? And one is just to grade it and reseed it and let it naturally, hopefully grow, and we miss a couple of probably another whole summer of softball. An alternative that we talked about last meeting was potentially doing sod, and Sean got a price on doing the sod of $49,000, correct, Sean?
That's accurate.
So by doing the sod, that would allow the field to be used sooner. And it would also, because it's sod, fill out a little better. It still needs a growing season, but not quite as long as the hydro seed. And then as part of this, we also had some additional conversations. If we go forward and the outfield gets done, we've done all the fencing, we put the new lights in, the last part of this would be the infield. And the infield, while not damaged through the process, really hasn't been able to be maintained because they haven't had access to it. So it's overgrown, and there's quite a bit of work that would be needed. So Sean was able to get a price also for that, to actually redo the infield, which would then give a complete renovated field. And Sean, what was it? Was that $8,000?
They just gave a rough order of magnitude of around $8,000, correct?
Of around $8,000. So that's where the discussion comes in. Also, we talked about, Sean, the need for an irrigation system. Now, we do have a well, but we don't really have irrigation as part of that.
The Parks Department had been talking with one of their vendors to put irrigation on that field.
Yes. And I don't think we have a price yet for that, do we? I haven't
heard of a price from the Parks Department. Yeah, they haven't told me anything on that.
But I think either way, if we're going to do this, where they have the well there, if we don't do an irrigation system, either way, we renovate a field, but we don't give them the resources to maintain it, we end up with a unkept.
Yeah, I'd be nervous about putting down sod without a reliable irrigation system. You're muted, Rich. You muted yourself.
Huh, okay, thank you. So anyone else with any thoughts on this? Or, these would be additional change orders. So it would add some cost, but it would also, give us a fully renovated softball field when it was all said and done.
Rich, do we get a guarantee with the sod that it will actually hook into the field there, grow? Does that come with the $49,000 price tag?
Sean, you want to? There are some, as long as you hit certain parameters. Can you?
Yeah, they would own an establishment period and then a maintenance period next spring if you bought it out, or depending on when you bought it out. But yeah, you'd have to set it up. Our current spec does have specifications for sod. So if we bought it under our current spec, we would hold those requirements. If we bought it out through someone else, we'd have to just make sure we ensure get what you pay for. So make sure everyone understands what you're buying.
So Chris, that's also kind of tied into, if we're gonna go down that road to try to try to ensure as much as possible that this takes, putting in that, the irrigation system would certainly, help solidify the sod taken.
Thank you.
Rich, I have a question.
Yes, Jared.
Who's responsible for damaging the grass in the outfield to begin with? So I should say I'm all in favor of taking every step we need to take to make this softball field pop and shine. I agree with Jane that I think we need to investigate how much a proper irrigation system is necessary in order to do the sod so that they can get back to using that field. But I would be curious to know how the field got damaged and why that wasn't originally spec'd out, if that was going to be a staging area for the construction folks, and is there remediation we can get on the $49,000 sod price from the people who were responsible for damaging it to begin with?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit, or Sean, you wanna?
Yeah, they weren't that area was not specified as a laydown space. Once they finished up the school, they kind of turned over that roadway around the school to the school department. They opened up the parking lot, and then that was really that's all the room they had left to lay out the rest of their stuff. So they weren't supposed to take it over. They did, so they are responsible for bringing that back to its existing condition. But I don't know that we can force them to put sod down. We could certainly require them to loam and seed it, which is what their plan was, to fill in any ruts and to fix the areas that they damaged. But if they were to sod the places they damaged, the rest of it wouldn't be sodded. So loam and seed would seem more appropriate to fix the areas that were damaged.
I appreciate that, Sean. Oh, sorry, Rich. I guess my only other thought to that would be, if we ultimately decided to do sod, would we be able to figure out what the price would be to restore it to its original condition? Because you're right, that's obviously what the reasonable expectation would be. So say it's $20,000, which it probably isn't, but I'm just throwing out a number. Say it's $20,000 to restore it to its original condition, but we decide we want to do sod for $49,000. Would they be able to kick in whatever that cost would have been, just so we can reduce our cost ultimately to lay down the sod?
Yeah, I think we're talking about really the cost is just of the hydro seeding, because they're probably going to have, at this point, they're going to have to put loam in there to fix any low spots. Anyway, so I mean, you're talking about like $2,500 maybe for to hydro seed half an acre. Yeah, if it's even that, it's not a ton of money. And then the question is on timing. If they're going to fix that field, and then we're going to talk about putting in irrigation, we're kind of running out of planting season as it is. So if it would be sodded in the spring, you would want to put that grass seed down now, just to support the loam that they put in and make sure everything doesn't fall apart over the winter. So if you don't do that, you'd have a tendency with rainstorms for all the field, all that dirt just to run off it. So the hydro seed would kind of hold it all together, and then they would come back in the spring and put, scrape it back and put sod, or do what they need to do to put sod on top of it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussions on this or thoughts?
I just have a quick question, and I probably already know the answer, but I'm just curious, the cost to put turf versus the sod and the irrigation and all of the infield.
I'd have to do the math, but I'd say 10 times the cost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that.
I figured, but I just figured I would say it out loud in case
Yeah,
anyone else is thinking it.
With turf, you need to not only put the turf down, but you have to take out what's there, scrape it down, and then build it back up for a proper substrate for it. So unless it's a much larger undertaking than just putting some dirt back down, or even putting sod down, which is probably the next step up. It would be a significant undertaking. I don't think we could do it as a change order to the project. It would have to be as a separate project.
Totally, got it. I just wanted to double check before we started thinking about all these other concessions. Thank you.
I think that what the committee needs to decide is whether or not we want to adjust the vision of the project from day one to take into account that we will lose a season of softball for the girls and the town if we do not sod. If we sod, we spend money that we didn't plan on spending. If we don't sod and we plant seeds, we will not have a softball season. That's what the Parks Department told us at the last meeting. So I think that's what the committee needs to really consider. And that's a tough decision because it is not something that we really discussed when we proposed this project to the town. So I think that's what the committee needs to decide.
Just another quick question. Sorry, Rich, if I may. Which one, and this is probably more a question for Sean, which one would provide longer term sustainability? I guess, what would the park department rather? Would they rather we do seed, or would they rather we do the sod? I guess, and maybe they haven't given us that answer yet. I'm not sure.
Not
They
wanting
did.
to speak for them, but I mean, sod is instant lawn. So I think once you put that down, 3 to 4 weeks later, you could be playing on it. Grass takes longer to establish, but once it's established, it's really no different. It's just grass.
Got it. Okay.
I mean,
So it takes longer to establish, and they would have to, for them, because they'd have to go through an entire growing season. So that's more maintenance for them to make sure that the hydroseed in the grass takes versus the sod would, as Sean said, takes a lot quicker and
Right.
establishes quicker.
To Dr. Cron's point, there's probably nobody on this call who hates spending money that we don't need to spend more than me, but I think that we have done a tremendous job on this project, and I know there might be some other things to discuss later, of ensuring that we stay within budget, ensuring that I believe we're actually under budget. $50,000, while I agree with Dr. Cron, the softball field may not have necessarily been in the vision, and it's maybe not necessarily, well, it's not school department property. It's a part of the project. It's a part of the look. It's a part of the feel. I ride the rail trail almost every day. Obviously, I know the difference, but as we talked about in the early stages of this project, it would look ridiculous to have rundown fields next to a sparkling brand new school. So I'm in favor of the sod option. Again, I'm a little disappointed that it kind of got chopped up and by vendors, but if it's nominal for them to fix it, then I think we kind of owe it to the project as an overall vision of that campus area to do the best option for the softball field, for the girls' leagues, and that's my opinion. I don't know if you want a motion, Rich, or what we're looking for.
Well,
here, but I can
let me just make one other, just so everyone's clear, right? So as we talk about this, if we don't do anything, the outfield will get, it'll get loomed and graded, so it's, so it's level. They will seed it, and then that's it, right? And there's no additional cost to us, and they kind of leave it more or less in the shape that they got it. If we go forward with the sod, and this is where we had some conversations on Friday, then that field, in essence, everything would have been done, including, the lights, the new fencing, the new dugouts, the outfield. The only thing left would be the infield. And that's where that conversation came in, that at least the thought is, if we're gonna go down the route of the sod, and that's 49,000, then it kind of makes sense to go forward with the extra additional 8,000, and then you have a total renovated field. So it would actually be about 57,000 to do that, because the infield, they didn't use the infield, they didn't go on it. It just because it hasn't been used in almost 2 years, the infield is kind of overgrown with weeds and what have you. So if we don't include that, then the town's gonna have to pick that up through the park budget to try to bring that infield back. Just so everybody's like fully clear on this, it would actually, I think it would make sense if we were gonna do the sod to also do the infield, so it's totally done.
I
And
agree.
irrigation, right, Rich?
And irrigation, yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Where
Yeah.
do we stand on the budget? Like 50,000, 57,000, or how far under budget are we? Like, how much am I going, if I
Roughly-
bump into a taxpayer at Target, how much am I saying now we just added to this project?
So from what it was budgeted to where we are right now, Sean, it's what, a little under $14 million that we are under the approved budget?
If we're holding some money aside for potential claims. But right now I'm showing not including things that we're gonna underrun, but just pure contingencies. 11.4 million is about where you're under budget.
So we're not going back to taxpayers for money at some point for this.
Oh,
It's-
no.
That bothered me to spend the money. I'm like, that's a lot of money to be spending, but okay, thank you. I feel better.
Well, I will say, Jill, if I can through you, Rich, in theory, if we do nothing and then we have to take it out of the Parks Department budget, we are going back to the taxpayers in theory.
Correct.
Correct. That was my
Just in a
point,
different
Jared.
way, yeah.
Yep.
So
Yes.
where we have $11 million and we're talking, even if, I mean, I don't know how much irrigation's gonna cost. Are we talking 100,000 out of an
No.
11.6 million? Right,
No.
exactly. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll make a motion to do it all, the irrigation, the sod and the infield
Well,
and.
Jared, before, I just want to make sure if anyone else has any comments before we do a motion. Does anyone else have any comments? Okay, so with that, I'll ask for a motion for the approval of sod, redoing the infield and irrigation on the girls softball field.
So move, Jared Valenzola.
I
Got a
second,
motion from Jared, got a second from Chris.
yep,
And let's go through. So Chris, we got a yes. Christine Flaherty,
Yes.
Jill,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Emily, you're on mute, I think. There you go.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jane,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Mark,
yes,
Danielle,
Yes.
and myself. All right, so that's unanimous.
Jared is also a yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jared. I thought I asked
That's
you
all
first.
right.
Sorry.
I may have
Getting used
missed
to
you.
this remote again. All right. So that takes care of what was on the agenda. We did have a request after the fact, and I want to make sure that Danielle has some time to talk. She had talked a little bit in the last meeting. This is about the multi-purpose field, some questions about bleachers, snack shack, press box, and some other things. So I want to allow Danielle some time to kind of talk on this. So if there's questions or not only by Danielle or anyone else in the committee, we can kind of talk about it and address it.
Hi, thanks. I just was asking some questions at the last meeting, and it sounded like maybe some other people also had some questions on the committee. But mostly I've been hearing a lot from people in the community about questions regarding the field. First of all, it's an amazingly beautiful field, and I think people are thrilled to see it. Kids are I mean, my own kids and their friends and other kids are super happy to have it there. But some of the questions that I've been hearing that I think would be important to be addressed by this committee is that questions regarding seating, bathrooms, a press box, a snack shack, and like some of the questions I heard, I think Alan asked a question about the rules for MIAA. I don't know exactly what those rules are. To me, it sounds like that without some of those things, we wouldn't be able to host any playoff games. I'm not sure if it's every game or just playoffs, but that's the way it sounded to me. So I just think it would be helpful for publicly those questions to be answered. And I know, Rich, you have a lot of information to share. So maybe if you want to start, I don't know if anyone has any additional questions, but if you want to share some of the answers to those about the scope of the project and how those things were designed and discussed during the design process.
Sure, and I think Alan has some, Jane actually, I think will have some additional information, particularly pertinent to MIAA. Actually, Jane, you wanna, because you did quite a bit of work on this. Do you want to take this, or you want me to?
No,
Start.
that's fine. I was not able to get in touch with the MIAA just to sort of start there. Danielle, I went down and walked and looked around. There is going to be an additional fence that's put in between the road.
The
for
road
lack
and
of
the
a better-
field?
Between the road and the field, that's gonna close off the seated section and allow it to be a ticketed venue. So there'd only be one entry and egress. So they could restrict entrance to the field for ticketing purposes. At the highest point closest to the school of the cement seating area, it needs to be regraded because 6 feet behind, I believe 6 feet is the right amount, Jay, you can correct me if I'm wrong. 6 feet behind the last cement seated area needs to be regraded so it's flat. So it would go fence, flat, cement, slight grade, cement, fence. Would be the area, and that whole area would be fenced in. The bathroom egress, there has to be a gate at the bathroom. We're at the 50-yard line that would point to the right of the loading dock where the bathroom door would be. It needs to be signage pointing to that bathroom, and we're working with Mark to make sure that door, if you go in that door, there are 2 bathrooms and then it dead ends, so you don't have any other egress into the building. But we're working to see the alarm on the left-hand side wall there, whether or not the entire building has to be unalarmed for that one area to be utilized, if we could only unalarm that one area. And then the final piece was, again, facing the field with your back to the school on the far right-hand side where the ticket area would be. There's a slab there for a potential concession stand, but there is no plumbing there. There's only electrical there on that slab. So those were sort of the details that I was able to figure out. And then one other thing, Rich, I forgot to mention to you, we did also think that there needed to potentially be more covered trash receptacles than the only 2 that are called for in the project.
Oh, okay.
Seemed like a very long area, the entire length of a football soccer field to only have 2 trash receptacles. One at the entrance and one sort of in the middle. You figure you've got people rotating in and out all weekend or whatever. That wasn't really enough. So that's as far as I got, Danielle, if that's helpful.
Sorry. Yeah, that is helpful. I'm curious though, like in terms of ticketing, what would be the purpose for having a ticketing booth? Because I don't think that without bleachers or bathrooms, we'd be able to host anything that would require ticketing.
But there are bathrooms, Danielle.
But is that enough?
Yeah, yeah. So that's why it's only seating for 300. So it's when you get above, I believe it's 400, that you start to run into compliance issues. So those 2 bathrooms would be sufficient for what we've got, what we put in.
And Rich, when it comes to hosting, I talked to Dan Kimball the other day. When it comes to hosting, say the boys soccer team made the first round, they're able to host their first round game on the turf or in the stadium. It's if the state, if the state called and said, hey, do you want to host a semifinal soccer game between Hingham and Situate? Sure, that's where it comes into whether you can or can't. If you have the ample seating or parking, not Rockland itself, so.
Correct.
So, and that's what I suspected. So if we wanted to be a neutral site and rent ourselves out as a neutral site for a semifinal or final state tournament, we would have to meet standards that we potentially do not meet.
Correct. The MIA says you have to have this much parking, this much seating.
Yeah, and I think parking becomes probably more of an issue than anything else that we've got lack of. But home games, but in first and second rounds, they would be able to host playoff games in MIAA playoffs.
That is correct.
Yeah. And I do know that even in we made the second round in baseball in Weymouth, and we applied for a waiver from MIA because we got home field in the second round, and MIA gave us a waiver because we didn't have a restricted ticket. We didn't have a restricted ticket area. We had the bathrooms, but not the other ticket area. And the other thing, Danielle, regarding use for a ticket booth, etc. A lot of times people might want to rent it out for a fundraiser as well, where people buy tickets to go to a certain event.
Oh, that's great. That's good to know. Thank you.
And then regarding the bathrooms, I know one of the questions from last week was like the day-to-day activities on the weekends. How is that going to be coordinated for use of bathrooms at the school, not just for tournaments, but more like weekends?
I think that's something we still need to talk a little bit about, and that will depend upon how much we can program the initial door to get in, Emily.
Okay.
Yeah, in the back, like how many fobs do we want out there, right? Or do we actually need to have or do we actually need to have a detail? And who is that detail? Is that detail parks, or is that detail schools? Because it's school bathrooms that need to be cleaned, but parks is in charge of leasing out the fields, or renting out the fields, or scheduling the fields. So a little complicated there.
Okay.
But at least going down, I felt as though that we can protect the interior of the Phelps school with these bathrooms.
This is Michelle.
How do we get in? Go ahead, Michelle.
We use those bathrooms out for recess time. So I guess I'm just concerned about are they going to be, who's cleaning them? So we're ready on Monday morning. Who's cleaning them when it's a nighttime event?
Yep.
And I guess the second thing I'm worried about is the parking lot itself. Is if we have a school event, because we often will have nighttime events. Where do we park if there's another event going on? So I think those are things we have to work out.
And who's paying the custodian that's going to be cleaning it? I mean, we're paying our Phelps. Sorry, the dogs came in the door. We're paying the our regular custodian in the evenings. And then we have the sports teams, right? Clean if we need other custodians for other things. Who's paying for the custodian that's doing the bathrooms too?
Right.
So that's what Jane was saying, got to kind of work through this, and we talked about that the other day. So the field itself comes under the purview of the park. The bathrooms come under the purview of the school department. So that's where got to kind of work through this. There's some similarities to, I'll give you youth basketball, for example, right? So, you know, the facility is used by the youth basketball, and they pay a fee to use that. So I don't know if they get something worked out where, you know, because the one thing that will have to happen is, to the point, it has to be cleaned. So, you know, the school will take on some cost to make sure that that's clean. So we just got to kind of work through that. But that's really more of, and not to take it, that's really more between the school committee and the park commissioners to kind of work through that. No different than how they kind of work through it up at the stadium, right? So the stadium is under the park purview. The school uses it. You know, what's the agreement that they have in place? Because, you know, the bathrooms get opened up. So they may, you know, I think there's already some things in place on how that gets handled.
Yeah, Rich, when it comes to the stadium, all we do is pay and open and close. They open the
Yep.
stadium, they close it. Whether they clean the restrooms or not, that's on the park department.
No, but you pay a fee to open and close it.
Correct, yes.
Yep. So there could be something similar to that, where instead of on the restrooms, instead of the fee being paid to the park commission, the fee may be paid to the school to clean that. But, you know, I think it's no different than, I believe youth football does the same thing, and I know baseball does it, youth baseball. So there's some precedent in there on how this operates. It just may be different entities because the school is the one controlling the bathroom, the restroom.
Michelle, I think that's a great point about the cleaning, and definitely it sounds like there's some historical policy that have been set in place that hopefully can get followed. But from my memory, part of the reason that during the design process that those bathrooms were put in was so that they could be used for the sports fields. And I also believe that there, from my understanding, some kind of feature that the locks could be on timers so that they're only accessible during different times. I don't know, Sean, if you can speak to that.
Oh, there we go. Yes, I mean, the whole building system is on an access control system that the school department controls. So there is ability to set timers on doors to the extent that the school wants to. That door is also on a key fob, so it could be, you know, key fob could be provided to who's renting it and only give them access to that one door in case there was a concern about that door just being unlocked at any given time.
I'll just add, I do also recall Danielle's recollection as well, as it at least relates to the bathrooms. And again, looking at the overall scope of this project, you know, people are going to show up there for sports and potentially not be able to use that bathroom. They're going to, regardless of what that reason is, they're going to, again, think that they didn't get their money's worth out of the project if they can't use the bathrooms that we kind of intended as being a part of it. And But Rich, I think you're right. This is definitely something that this school and parks need to work out.
Can I ask how this conversation went to, we're not going to have access to the bathrooms? I don't think anyone has said that they won't have access to the bathrooms.
At the last meeting, that was mentioned that we have to figure out if there could be access to those bathrooms.
So no different than the restrooms being used up at the stadium. It has to be worked out by the controlling entities.
It was in design. It's always been in design. It's still in
Yep.
design. It has been done. The door,
I'm just telling you from my perspective, what it sounded like was that it was unsure if that was going to happen at the last meeting. That's the understanding I had from the comments that were made, and that's why I'm asking about it.
No, the only comments were is that the building committee doesn't have control over that. That is the park department and the school department and the youth organizations coming to an agreement.
I think the basketball at the middle school, youth basketball at the middle school is the best model for us to look at to see how they're using it there because it's inside the building. They're using the bathrooms, obviously. What is the model there? And can we apply it here? Right. I think we've confirmed that we can lock the building down to Michelle's concerns. And I think, Michelle, it's absolutely certain that we can guarantee that those bathrooms will be clean and ready to go on Monday morning.
Yeah, that was my only concern. Not the, I knew the access has always been there, since the beginning, but I just want to make sure that, you know, especially, I think it was mentioned nighttime use, like, I just want to make sure that it's not open just to the general public all the time, because I'm just afraid what we will find in there. That's all.
Agreed. No, agreed. Yep.
And then while we're discussing add-ons and whatnot at the field, is there going to be like a storage shed of some sort down there for equipment or coaching stuff? And I know it's not a free-for-all, but I'm just thinking out loud.
No, there was nothing in there for storage.
Okay. I don't know, is that something we can discuss or is it too
But
late?
who would be accessing that for storage?
I mean, there was a shed down by the softball field, right, for
No, the
equipment?
shed, so the shed at the softball field is still there. And that was,
Oh, it is.
yeah, that's still there in the snack shack, and that was put in by the girls softball.
All right.
Yep.
Guess I haven't.
I would say there would, I mean, again, I know it's not a free for all, I agree, Emily, but there would absolutely be youth sports that would be using, that could use
Yep.
a shed, lacrosse, football, any organization that may practice there. Frankly, the other Hart stuff is a terrible field to be practicing on. And if there is an opportunity for them to practice on turf on a new field, I would suspect people may want to use that if that was an option, and having a shed may be helpful.
So the only thing I'll say on that, Danielle, and this is part of, so any fields currently, if there are snack shacks or storage facilities on those fields, and they're all managed by the park department, those facilities have been built by the youth organizations. So whether it was girls softball, little league, you know, I'm trying to think what else, soccer. So it wasn't paid, none of those were paid for by taxpayer funds is part of that. The taxpayers provided the field, but those types of extras have always been done by the youth organizations. And the other problem with putting a storage in is then who controls it. So if you've got youth football, you've got soccer, you've got lacrosse using it, and high school, that storage quickly runs out. And what ends up being left there, I guess. So there's that type of logistics challenge as well. Because unlike most of the other fields that we have, this is truly a multi-purpose where, you know, there's potentially 3 or 4 sports that are going to use this field, whether it's high school or whether it's youth.
So Rich, I do understand what you're saying and I don't disagree. Well, obviously I can't disagree with the fact you stated that youth sports are obviously the ones who build the storage, build the snack shacks and things like that. But on the flip side, again, much in the same vein as the discussion with the softball field, considering some of the available funds that we do have, what could be the potential harm of exploring other amenities to these fields that would enhance those youth sports organizations. As you pointed out, one of the beauties of this field is it could be potentially used by multiple sports, so it would help multiple organizations. What could be the harm in exploring those added amenities that would enhance not only the use of those fields, but also potentially reduce the storage burden for other youth sports organizations across our offerings?
So the only thing I'll say that is then who manages that snack shack, right? So it would come under the management of the park commission. And if you have multiple entities using that snack shack and it is town owned, how do you manage that? Right? So if lacrosse is
I'm not
going
saying
in, if
snack-
football's going in, if it becomes very, very challenging to try to manage that.
I think we were talking just storage, Rich. And I hate to
Yeah, I'm
interrupt
talking
you,
like
but we
balls
have
and
storage
things.
at the track that is the track itself is multi-purpose. There's track, there's
Yep.
soccer, there's lacrosse, and there's a storage shed there. I don't know who put it in, and I could be talking out of turn, but
I believe it was the school itself that put that in.
so I think that all the teams sort of know that all of the teams are in that storage unit together. And it's all different seasons and it's boys and girls and everybody, and they're sharing it. I just wonder if it is worth trying to figure out if we put it there. It's
So
not
I
up to
believe,
us to
and I could
manage
be
it, but
wrong, but I believe that shed down at the track is for high school and it supports the high school sports. I don't think it supports any youth sports. I could be wrong, but
I
it
think this
just
is
supports.
we're in a unique opportunity here that we haven't had a youth multi-purpose field, and we do now. So I think going forward, it's sort of how do we want to handle it? Do we just say we don't have it because you're a youth sport and you're multi-purpose and we're not doing it? Or do we open it up to what do we all think? Do we think it's something that it's one shed and we need to all get along?
No, I understand it. I guess my question, I'm not for it or against it. What I'm saying is who manages that? Right? So if lacrosse wants it and they put all their stuff in it, then soccer comes in and says, wait a minute, I don't have my space. And then the high school comes down and says, I need my space. How do you manage it? So how we have everywhere else, the sheds that have been put in have been by the specific sport, youth sport generally, and then they control it and they own that and they have access to it. So that's the other thing is if we're going to put a town-owned shed, who has access to it? How is it locked? There's just some logistics things that, and I'm not for it or against it. I just think it would add a lot of challenges, and I don't know to what extent. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing out the devil's advocate. How do you manage that? Because it would actually be a town asset versus a youth organization asset.
So Rich, currently down there, Rich, there's a shed that soccer uses and there's the old cement garage that used to keep the track mats that they needed for the javelin and the long jump and all that. I know because of wear and tear on the cement building, they had to pull some mats and they're being stored up in the high school until they figure out what they're going to do with
What they're going to do. Yep.
Correct. So that's it. But my question here is for Sean. Sean, and there was a paperwork that I saw that you sent me that said athletic field equipment. It came with a list of the soccer nets, the lacrosse nest, the field goal post. On it, it said roll-up mobile storage units. Is that just, I could be wrong, but it said mobile, roll-up mobile.
There are,
storage units.
there are two of them, I believe.
Yeah, they're already there.
Okay,
And
those,
that is for the park department to store all that material there.
okay, that's for the equipment for the turf too, to put that
Yep.
stuff there. Okay, I didn't know if it was equipment shed or for equipment for the turf, so.
No, it's for like the nets and all that stuff that
Okay.
they have a place. Yeah,
Okay,
because that
okay,
was
I
all
figured.
supplied by the Parks Department. So there are storage sheds up there, but it's for the Park Department, specifically for the field.
Thank you.
Also, just circling back to the snack shack, the youth organizations and the high school organizations use the snack shack at the stadium, and there hasn't been an issue in sharing space or keeping it clean. The organization, the high school boosters and Rockland Youth Football just work together to make that happen. At least in my experience in the last, 8 years of having kids play sports, that has not been an issue.
Sean, Sean, I think you have to leave, correct? You've got an obligation.
Yeah, I gotta go pick my son up in
Yeah.
7 minutes. He's gotta go. So I
Okay.
gotta head off. Is there anything else you need from me, or you guys good for now?
Sean, just quickly for my thing, at what point does the turf field be turned over to the park department and is able to use?
Right now, the Mike, the landscape architect, was out last week and he was out again today doing his punch list for it. And then assuming there's no showstoppers, that we just need his punch list to be uploaded so that we know any defects from the install, and after that we should be good to go. There are some areas, the grass areas around it, that I would probably suggest staying off of. They've just been sodded a couple weeks ago, so even if you're going to open it up for practices or things like that, I would caution to maybe keep people off that if you to give that sod a really good chance of growing in, so it'll be ready to go next year. But other than that, I think it's going to be up to the Parks Department to open it up for everyone else.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.
So is it possible to look at pricing for a storage shed? I know it's kind of a mixed audience of the yes
So
and no,
Emily,
but I don't.
Emily, there are two storage sheds there as part of the project.
Yeah, for the equipment, I'm saying like.
Correct. Yeah.
Extra. I think extra storage is needed.
Yeah, we can look at getting, so I guess on that, okay, we can look to get a price on the storage shed. All right.
Rich, this is maybe a question why couldn't we have the shop teacher build a shed?
So that wouldn't be part of the project. So this is, we're starting to go down this path of what's part of the project and what isn't. So
Well, do you want to
we
save?
could
money?
look to do that
Makes
if we're going to do this as part of the project, it would have to go through, the right process and be part of it and not built on a one-off. If we wanted to make it part of the project. Now, we finish up the project. If at that point in time, we want to look at doing something to that effect, we have to figure out where the funding would come and who would be responsible for it.
I think I would like to, get some prices on what storage and a snack shed would potentially cost before making an ultimate decision. I can't imagine it would cost millions of dollars, but if something like that came back costing that, I guess I'd be curious, to see what what the cost would be. And to your point, Rich, yeah, making it a part of, I personally don't have a problem with making it a part of the project. If that's what everybody else wants to do, but you know, let's come back with a plan and a price, and you know, we can take action on it. If it comes back as being a $2 or $3 million thing, then obviously forget it. But as it relates to the logistics, you know, I don't know if somebody else said it, but you know, you guys are going to figure out the logistics of the bathrooms and stuff. It's the same idea. Figure out the logistics and kind of go from there.
So we can look at getting a price on the store, on a snack shack. The challenge with that, so much different than a storage shed, right? That is fairly easy to kind of move forward. The snack shack, because that ties into electrical, even if it was over there and it's on a pad, it comes to engineering design, building permits,
Sure.
on electrical permits and all that. We also have a project that is almost done. So this would extend the closing of the project. So that adds some complexities to it, not just on the pricing. And then the other part of this, honestly, we had these in-depth conversations 4 years ago. There's a reason why there's a pad with electric and a snack shack wasn't built, right? There's a reason why there wasn't a press box built. There's a reason why there weren't stadium seating, because on the initial quote going through, it was about $750,000. And as a group, during those discussions 4 years ago, these are the decisions that we made because of the money and because we wanted to try to put the best project that we could, but at an affordable cost. And we as a committee decided not to do these things because of it. And I remember some of the conversations we had, particularly on the snack shack, was every other field that we have in town, it was the youth organizations that actually put those snack shacks in. So we can certainly look to get a price, but this could, and Mark could talk probably a little bit on this. I don't know how it impacts the whole project and closing out on the project, because this would add some time to it, unlike a storage.
The only thing I'll just say to that, Rich, I do remember those conversations. But 4 years ago, I don't think we anticipated being able to come in under budget by $11 million. So 4 years ago, we were looking at projecting what the realities of the project were going to be. And I remember some of the things that we cut, obviously some of these items that were talked about being one of those things. But we weren't aware of what the bonding was going to come back with, considering how low interest rates were at the time. So certainly I understand that the decision that we made 4 years ago is the decision that we made, but that was based on the best available information at that time. I understand what you're saying. It could add time. It could add, you know, a delay to potentially closing it out, but we only have one bite at this apple.
Which can add some additional costs too.
Cost, no, and I understand that. Yeah, time is money. So I understand all of that. But, you know, if it's adding another, you know, if it was 750,000 back then, and because we're going to tack on more time, it's another $250,000. It's another $1 million. So we come in 10 million under budget instead of 11 million. I personally, again, don't see the problem, and at least we still have these folks on board. We still have the available funding. Figuring out what that cost is, and again, if it comes back to be an exorbitant cost, then we continue to scrap it. But again, I think you're right. The spirit of the conversations we had 4 years ago is correct, and they are kind of how I remember them myself. But just bear in mind that was with the best available information we had at that time. We're now at this juncture 4 years later, where we have $11 million that we are under budget and could potentially use to, again, much like with the softball fields and everything else, really continue to make this project shine even brighter than it already has.
Rich,
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? Did we vote on everything we needed to vote on?
We have tonight, yes.
Okay, I need to get going myself. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I
thank
do
you.
as well. Would you want to vote, Rich, for us to explore, to just,
Well, no, this
sort of
wasn't
vote
even
to-
really an agenda item, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So we.
so then can we ask for it
this
to be
is-
on the next
this is
agenda? as a-
Unanticipated.
Okay,
So, well, I'll ask Sean about about trying to get some prices if they did a snack shack and a storage shed.
okay. And then we
And then
can
we can
potentially
revisit it.
discuss and vote on it at a later meeting. Yeah, I think that would be great. I would appreciate that.
Alan, did you have? You
Yeah,
muted. There you go.
I just wanted to say that I think it's very important that we remember the contract that we made with the town when we started this project. And when we make additions to that contract, we're changing it. And I don't want anyone to be able to say that we had extra money, so we spent it without permission. And I just want the committee to be aware of the fact that if we add something that costs even $50,000, we are adding something that we did not ask the public to pay for. And I just think we need to be aware of that as a committee. I also understand that this money is available, and if later it needs to be added by the Parks Department, it's going to cost us more. But I think the committee needs to be aware of that, and if we are making a decision to add something, then we are changing the contract that we made with the public. We did pass this project by 64 votes. And I think the trust that we've built up here is very important for the town going forward, whether it be a roads project or another building that needs to be built. And I just want this committee to maintain its integrity without any question. That's all. I just wanted to raise that issue. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Alan. And again, as I couch every comment I've made tonight, there is nobody who's a greater stickler of stewarding taxpayer dollars more than me. And by no means am I in any way looking at an $11 million, I don't want to call it a surplus, but being 11 million under budget and thinking about how we can spend it all. I agree we made a contract, but we did pass the vote. That vote can't be undone. We've been given stewardship of these funds, and we have far exceeded what the town expected of all of us, especially the leadership team, your leadership team, and Mark and everybody else, and Rich and everybody who has ensured that this project came in so far under budget. So I agree with you. If we were pressing up against it and we were looking into doing these things, then by no means would I in any way advocate or want to explore any of these potential options. But ultimately, as a taxpayer in Rockland, such as I am, the cost to do these things is going to be borne some way, somewhere, somehow. And as far as I'm concerned, I, as a voter, not even just a member of this committee, but as a voter, gave the authority to this committee to spend up to $86 million on a school and, yeah, a little bit of field. So personally, I agree with you. I firmly believe that adding this one last exploratory piece and potentially this one last component of the project still keeps us within the spirit of what the taxpayers in the town expected of us. And again, we're going to come in way under budget. That is a testament to everybody on this board and on this call. And as a taxpayer first and as a voter, I'm greatly appreciative of that. And the equity in my home is appreciative of that as well. So that's all. I agree with you. We made a deal with the community. I think we're owning up to that end of the bargain. And that'll be the last comment I make because, like Jill, I have to jump off as well in a minute.
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I was just gonna, so with that, let's, I will get some pricing, and we'll look to, set up another meeting, towards the end of this month, after we get some information, so we can have some additional conversations and actually put it on the agenda, okay?
Gonna be
With that,
additional.
I got a motion. Oh, sorry, Mark.
You're gonna need design fees now. There's a little bit to it.
Absolutely.
So keep it in mind. The intent of the whole field was to keep it family friendly and it was a lot of low key. I want to make it too commercial. Just keep that in mind.
I mean, personally, you know, my history with softball, little league, and soccer, where we did fundraising and did these things as an organization. I get a little nervous on what the feedback may be on those organizations. I know Little League just spent a sizable chunk of money putting in a new snack shack. So that's another thing to think about, that you know, if we do this, that benefits, you know, a youth program or two that other youth programs have had to take these costs on. That's another whole conversation.
So the last point I will make before I second Mr. Bernika's motion, I agree with you, Rich, but if we do this for these organizations, that will free up people's dollars to continue to support these other organizations in their endeavors as well. If we don't do this, then these other potential youth groups that will be using those fields will be asking the same parents or some crossover parents to put the money into it. And if we do this, that at least takes care of some groups. And I agree, I'm a firm believer in equity across all our youth sports, but if we're able to do this for some, that'll in theory free up dollars for others. But I will second Mr. Bernika's motion because
All right,
the radio calls me.
we get a motion and a second. All in favor? Let's just do a yeah, raise your hand. All right, thank you.
Thank you.